I said Robbie Bosco in the 1984 Holiday Bowl was number one. Brian said Kyle Van Noy. Let's bring in Blaine Fowler now to get his opinion. What is the greatest individual performance by a BYU athlete in a big game, Blaine?
I don't even think it's close, and I know that one of the listeners sent it in, but Ty Detmer against Miami. Come on, you guys. It's first of all, the atmosphere for that game is the best atmosphere I've ever seen for a football game that BYU's been involved in. And secondly, as I look back, see, we have the advantage when we look back at actually evaluating more effectively or more accurately how good the win was, because we can look at the whole body of work looking back. And in Miami, I still believe to this day is the best football team that BYU has ever beaten, because they finished that season in 90 number 3 in both polls. And their only losses that year were BYU on the road and then at Notre Dame, who was number 6 in the country that year. They killed Texas in the Cotton Bowl and finished number 3 in the country.
Everyone does that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Everybody beats Texas, not in the Cotton Bowl, not back then either. And so,
big deal.
So
now.
To me, that's the best team BYU has ever beaten. It set the stage for BYU's only Heisman Trophy winner, because I believe Ty Detmer won the Heisman Trophy in that game. And BYU that year, they were 10-3 that season, but that stage was such a big national stage. That Miami team was supposed to be good, number 1 in the country. Ty Detmer goes for 406, 3 touchdowns. Remember, he only had 1 interception in that game. He was flawless down the stretch. And then, as you look back on it, Miami was a great football team. So to me, against the best competition BYU's ever played in football, he was at his best. And so I got to give it to Ty. And that's if we're talking football. If we're talking all sports, then it's almost like a 2-game thing. But I've got to give it to Jimmer Fredette for his back-to-back San Diego State wins. The one in Provo where he had 43. And remember, that's when BYU was top 10. I think they were 9th. San Diego State was in the top 5.
Yes.
Kawhi goes off in that game. The nation spotlight is on BYU. I think launches themselves into where they think they're an elite team. Then they go back down to San Diego, and maybe even a better game. Ty has 25, but he has 9 assists in that game. You know, BYU was the only team that had beaten San Diego State that year, so now it's the rematch. San Diego State's 27-1, and again ranked number 4 in the country. BYU's number 7 now, and BYU pounds them 80-67. And I remember, because I did an interview that week with Coach Fisher, and he said after the game, he said, I told my team, and they didn't want to hear it, that BYU team was a Final Four talent team, and they didn't have anything to be ashamed of. And so to me, Jimmer leading a Final Four talent team in back-to-back games at home against San Diego State and then down in Viejas Arena down there in San Diego, I have a hard time putting anything in front of either of those performances. And, it's hard to choose between those. But to me, those are the top. And I acknowledge the New Mexico the crazy game he had against New Mexico was only 1 free throw that you mentioned, Jerem. But the bigger stage was 2 top 10 teams on national television in basketball, and that's why I put those other 2 with Jimmer Fredette. So, and I would argue that those are the 2 best basketball teams, and that's one of the best basketball teams BYU's ever played, most talented. I think Kawhi Leonard's proved that out when he was with what he's done since then. But so I don't know. What do you guys think? What about Ty's performance against Miami? Is that not the best football team BYU's ever played in history?
I agree with that statement with Miami. I think that the 84 Holiday Bowl meant more for BYU in terms of, it sealed the national championship. And Robbie Bosco had 343 in that game, despite coming out and you come into the game. So maybe he throws for 400 and 3 touchdowns instead of 343 and 2 in that game. I don't know. Yeah, no.
So that's a big, huge stage, and I think the whole country was watching because, is BYU really any good? The problem with that is that Michigan just not as good a football team.
We don't need to mention that, Blaine.
Well, and I don't want to take anything away from my boy because that's my roommate and that's my team, right? But I'm just trying to be objective here. If I'm not objective, then everything's the best in 1984. Obviously, if I'm not objective, we're the best in '94. Absolutely, absolute best. The problem was we turned the ball over a bunch in that game. That game was way closer than it should have been. We were a way better football team than Michigan, and we should have handled them. It shouldn't have come down to the end of a game. Now, they were very, very good defensively, but they were nicked up there. Jim Harbaugh was watching from the sideline. It's the biggest win in BYU history because of what it meant by just putting an exclamation point on the end of a tremendous season. Mm-hmm. And if you go undefeated in a season, hey, I think if you can win 5 practices in a row these days, it's pretty good. Let alone that many games in a row, right? It's hard to stay focused for that many weeks and to be lucky enough to do it. So to me, that's the greatest season in BYU history. But if we're going to single out a game, that was an exclamation point against a team that wasn't the best team we played on the schedule that year and a team that we should have handled much easier. That's why I put this one with Ty in front of it, because I believe that was a phenomenal football team in Miami. They proved it out over the season, and to me it's still the best single win that BYU's ever had in football, even better than the Oklahoma win or the A&M win that we talk about with 96 or the Kansas State win in 96. I think the second most talented football team BYU's ever played was the 1980 Holiday Bowl against SMU with Eric Dickerson and Craig James. I think that was a top 5 talent football team that BYU beat that year. So to me, those are the 2 best teams, Miami number 1 and SMU number 2.
Uncle B, I can't believe you just said better than the 2009 Oklahoma win when I'm on the show right now. Maybe if it's Spencer and Jerem, but come on, man.
Brian's first game as a Cougar.
My first game? Come on. No, I get what you're saying.
To my nephew Brian, I always just try to be objective, right? I
get what you're saying. You make a great point. And I talked to Jerem about this a little bit earlier that, when you are ranking a player or a team or a performance, you do have to look at the bigger picture, at all the factors that play into it. So that's a good point that you made with that Michigan team. For me, it's Kyle Van Noy, not because I'm a defensive player, but just because I understand how difficult it is to have a true impact where you are winning the entire game by yourself on the defensive side of the ball. You're not touching the ball every snap like the quarterback. You're not in a position to get your hand on the ball being a running back or a receiver. So for you to score on the defensive side right there, it just says it all to me in that performance.
The debate is not how great the individual performance was on any of these. It's how big was that game.
Yeah,
that's the discussion.
That's the only reason I wouldn't put Kyle's up there, because right after that game and still to this day, I think it's the single most impactful, and I'm talking NFL or college, defensive performance I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you're right, Brian. He single-handedly won the game. That never happens with a defender.
Nope.
And I walked away from that game, and I thought, I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen a defensive player all of a sudden go, well, looks like I'm going to have to make some plays if we're going to win this because the offense isn't moving the ball, and then just take the game over and win a game. I don't know how you do that on defense. He somehow did it. So to me, it's the best single-handed defensive performance where a defender, you can just go, that guy won the game. How often do you do that on defense? Never. But I'll agree with you on that, Brian. That it was incredible, but the game wasn't as big. It wasn't for a national championship. It wasn't against the number 1 team in the nation. It wasn't against a top 5 San Diego State basketball team. It wasn't Danny Ainge against UCLA, to get to the Sweet 16. So the game wasn't as big, and that's why I have to move that one down. Certainly the best individual defensive performance I've ever seen.
But it was against a team that took away my scholarship. 2000. I'm sorry. I don't want to go there no more.
Well, you did. You just did. And think about this for a second, but as we move on in a moment. If Kyle Van Noy doesn't show up and make those plays, that's a 7-win season, not an 8.
Right.
That's a 7-win season. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so Taysom Hill made our list. We didn't put together a top 10. We just threw out some there. But 259 against Texas. The 417 passing, 100-plus rush against Houston was, the 7th QB in FBS history to ever do that. In 2013, it seemed like Taysom Hill had to shoulder the individual load a little more than 2014, where he got the ball to playmakers. BYU's 4-0, they're ranked 18th, and then he gets hurt. Do you see 2015 being more like 2013 or 14 Taysom Hill?
This year he's going to be more of a distributor, and we already heard him on media tell us that he and Robert and I have talked a lot, and the game plan is for him to be more of a distributor. There are going to be fewer run plays that are called for him. He's still going to run around and make plays, but they're going to be fewer. He's going to be more careful and get down. But I think he can do that because I think there's so much talent in the receiving core and the running back core around him. I think the offensive line is going to be more solid than they were last year, so the protection will be better. So I think that this becomes an offense that looks more like the one that Christian Stewart ran down the stretch, which was very effective, mixed with the threat that Taysom Hill can take off and just kill you with his feet. So this offense, if you're a defensive coordinator, and the offense becomes what I think it can this year, it's just completely scary to try to defend that. And so if he's doing it all and he's shouldering the load like he did 2 years ago, that's not a good thing for BYU. If he's distributing the ball and he's contributing and there's all these weapons that you have to defend, and then all of a sudden he takes off and runs 70 yards for a touchdown is kind of an afterthought, that's scary for defensive coordinators. And that's what I think BYU is going to be this year. And after this year, we're going to be talking about a performance that Taysom Hill had in a big year, in a special year, when BYU had a great record against the best schedule they've ever played, where he not only throws for 400 yards, but he has 100 yards rushing like he did in Houston, but it's going to be a bigger game than Houston.
That was going to be my next question for you, Uncle B, is who is most likely to have the next greatest individual performance? And let's add a little bit more on this outside of Taysom Hill.
I think, depending on how healthy Jamal gets, I think he has a chance to have some big games. And the reason I do is I think we'll see him utilize the running backs utilized out of the backfield. I think we'll see a more balanced offense where the running backs will have a chance to make bigger plays. And when you think of running backs having big games, you know, a guy that runs the ball 37 times in a game and has 150 yards, that's a great performance. Mm. But a guy that runs it 11 or 12 times and has 190 yards because he breaks off a 65-yarder and he breaks off a 50-yarder, that's what I think this offense is capable of this year. So I think we're going to see those running backs. And if Jamal's 100%, like he keeps telling me he's going to be, then I think he has a chance to have a really, really special game this year and get some big chunks and turn in some big yardage in a couple of games.
We should bring up one of the greatest rushing performances of all time. Of course, Eldon Fortie's 272 in 62 against George Washington. But this morning someone said, didn't Luke Staley have a huge game? Yeah. Luke Staley ran for 196 and 5 touchdowns on 22 carries, 8.9 a pop against Colorado State in 01.
Wow.
That was crazy. That was crazy.
His entire junior season was just one ridiculous game after another. And at the time, Kyle Whittingham told me he was the best running back he had ever seen or had to coach against. So had ever played against or coached against up to that point. Because the combination of being almost 230 pounds, yet being lightning fast, so that strength-speed combination is just one that BYU hadn't had before, and they really haven't had since. Like, he was legit sprinter speed at almost 230. And so you'd go to defend him, Brian, and you can imagine this. They toss the ball to him, he goes to the edge, and the first time you're defending him, he's gliding, and you think you got the right angle, and he just turns the corner and runs away from you, and you go, oh, man, I didn't realize he was that fast. So now you take a more aggressive angle the next time he gets it on the toss, and you start going as fast as you can, and then he just plants his foot and cuts back inside and breaks 9 arm tackles and goes for a touchdown. And so I think he's the most difficult back to defend BYU's ever had because of that combination. And that junior year, before he got hurt, he was unbelievable. And, you know, BYU's only Doak Walker Award winner. So he had a lot of great games.
That's when you get blocked as a defender on purpose, so you don't look bad on the film.
Yeah. Blaine, we always try and compare Taysom Hill to a quarterback. Do we need to compare him to Luke Staley physically? Is that the comparison?
He's more – well, think about it. So I think up to this point, Luke Staley's the biggest freak that's ever played at BYU. Physically the biggest freak. No, I got to take that back. Because Ziggy's a freak.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Ziggy, definitely.
So let's talk about freaks in BYU history.
In a positive way.
In a positive way. These are freaks in a positive way. So Luke Staley's a freak. You're not supposed to be that big and that fast. It's just – and his calves – so I was doing a San Diego State game down there, and Ted Tollner – I'm trying to think if it was Ted or it was somebody that had coached at BYU, and it might have been Ted Tollner that was there then. And Luke was warming up, and I just remember the coach looking at me and going, look at those calves. What opposing coach looks at a running back and says, look at those calves? they were ridiculous.
Coach.
Right.
Yeah, so diamond calves he had. And, I mean, the guy just – I mean, he lifted hard and worked hard, but he was just gifted genetically. And then Ziggy comes through, so I think he's the next big freak because you're not allowed to be that big and run that fast. That's just stupid crazy,
It's
right?
illegal in 9 countries.
Yeah, and I remember talking to the basketball coaches when he tried out for basketball. They watched him run up and down the floor, and they said, clearly this kid is a freak, but he just doesn't have the hands or the skill to play basketball. This guy should be on the football team, and they were absolutely right. And now he's dominating at the highest level. So but I think that Taysom Hill now is number 3. If I'm going to rank all-time freaks, Taysom's right up there. He's a complete freak of nature. He's unbelievably fast. But he's built like an NFL outside linebacker. Not even strong safety. He's built like a backer. And I'm convinced that if he wanted to, he could say tomorrow, I'm switching to outside backer. He could start to train like a backer, and he can play in the NFL as an outside linebacker.
Wow.
How many quarterbacks can you say that about in the history of the game?
Dak Prescott, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And so he's right there. So those are my 3 freaks in BYU history.
And then some random kid at the Elms in the 80s. Yeah. That's it. Those are the top 4.
It goes Ziggy, and it goes Taysom. I'm not sure what order. Taysom's right in there in the mix.
Yeah. Blaine, great stuff. We appreciate the time, and enjoy the summer. We'll catch up with you soon.
All right, guys. Thanks.